said, okay, look, we want to start an empire. Their long-term goal, if they beat the North, was to conquer Mexico, go straight down the peninsula into South America, and create a Confederate empire. I mean, their plan was really, once they won that war, they were going to become the dominant force in the Americas. Well, the war gets started. The war gets started. And of course, you can imagine there are free blacks in the North who show up and say, look, we want to fight. We want to fight. And everyone in the North says, oh, no, you can't fight. You can't fight. Our people in the North, we're ready to fight a war to keep the Union together. But we're not ready to fight a war to end slavery. Here's an example I think you guys might be able to tap into. Think about Israel and our war in Afghanistan or Iraq, right? If you had gone to Israel, you said, look, we want you to fight in this war. The Israelis would say, great. We'll run it for you. Because we can't stand them. But what do we as Americans say? Oh, no, you can't fight this war. Because if you fight in the war, then the other Muslim countries are going to turn against us. Okay, the other Muslim countries can support us when we go into Afghanistan, when we go into Iraq, if the Israelis aren't part of it, but they hate you guys so much. There's no way that they're going to allow us to fight a war against Muslims if they see Jews as the primary beneficiaries. It was the same here. In the North, the agreement was, we are going to fight a war to keep the Union together, not to abolish slavery. So when the blacks volunteer to fight, no, we don't want you. This is going to be a white man's war. We do not want you. Well, what happens? The single most important thing, I think, for black people in the United States was when Abraham Lincoln went to Robert E. Lee and said, Robert E. Lee, you know Robert E. Lee? No, yes. He was the general who ultimately commanded the Confederate forces. Brilliant general, brilliant. Maybe the best military mind America ever produced. Lincoln went to him and said, I want you to run the Union Army. But Robert E. Lee was from Virginia, and his state of Virginia has succeeded and become part of the Confederacy. And Robert E. Lee said, no, I choose my state over my country. So he goes and heads to Virginia, where he's eventually going to become the commander of the Confederacy. That left Lincoln going to generals who basically didn't know what they were doing. Right? At the start of the Civil War, you have 20 million people in the North. You have 9 million in the South. And of their 9 million, 4 million are slaves. If Robert E. Lee had become the general of the North, it would have been a short war. It would have been a short war, the Union would have been put back together, and slavery would have continued to exist. But because Robert E. Lee left, this war goes badly for the North. It goes badly for the North for the first 2 years. It's just, by the time this war is done, well, here it is. It's going to be this. 600,000 dead. 600,000 dead out of a population of 30 million, 2% of the people. 1 in 50 people are going to die in the Civil War. That would be tantamount to us fighting a war today where 6 million people get killed. Okay, imagine the concept of us fighting. Because we lost maybe 1,500 people in Iraq. Imagine if we fought a war where 6 million people were killed. That's the kind of thing that you're talking about there. They had single days where more people were killed in the Civil War on a single day than all of the American wars combined up to that point. If you go back and you look at the Revolutionary War, there was something like only 2,000 Americans were killed. But here, the Civil War, we're talking about 300 times that number, 600,000, 2% of the population. So this war was bloody, and it lasted a long time. And what happened? Lincoln, as does everyone else in the North, starts to change their minds. We are losing this war. We have to do something dramatic or we will lose this war, right? You are the president of the United States. Imagine being the president of the United States and your concern is that the country split during your presidency. So throughout history, you're going to be known as the person who split the country apart. It's not the reputation you want to have. What does Lincoln do? He decides to free the slaves. Three reasons. One, France, Great Britain, and Russia were all talking about coming in from Europe, intervening in the American Civil War with the view of separating the North from the South and the creation of two separate countries. All three of those countries, France, England, and Russia, had all recently abolished slavery. If Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation and frees the slaves, none of those countries are going to enter into the war because now they're entering into the war would be to support slavery. Second reason he does it, right here. 4 million out of the 9 million people in the South, 4 million are black. If you can deprive the South of their slaves, you can deprive them of their ability to fight the war. And the third reason Lincoln issues it, so that he can start to enlist black troops in the war. And by the end of the Civil War, look at this. By the end of the Civil War, 14% of the troops in the North were black. 25% of the Navy was black. Lincoln will say the black troops were the difference in the war. Okay, now let me see if I can explain this one to you. Abraham Lincoln says, government by the people, of the people, and for the people would have perished had it not been for the black troops. Whatever America becomes after 1865, it would not have become had it not been for those black troops. And you know the killer? Follow this. After that, 3 amendments are added to our U.S. Constitution. The 13th, which abolishes slavery. The 14th, which provides that blacks are now citizens of the United States. It provides for due process of the law. It also provides for the equal protection principle. I'm going to come back to this in just a second. And then the 15th Amendment, which prohibits discrimination in voting based on color. But, you know, in the entire, well, we're talking about a Constitution that was ratified in 1789. In this entire period, there have only been 26 amendments to the Constitution. 10 of them were added in 1791 as the Bill of Rights. So between 1791 and 2009, there have only been 16 amendments to the Constitution. 3 of them were after the Civil War, all of them to deal with the problems that black people were facing coming out of slavery. And after all, right, the black people had saved the country. Let me just see how this is going to work. Somebody says, you guys know about freedom of speech, right? You got your right to freedom of speech, and you got your right to freedom of religion, worship the religion you want in your own way.